Bloomberg News.
Start off this hour with a special guest, someone you all know quite well, Jim Rogers, chairman of Roger Holdings, and always outspoken, always colorful, and always doing something with his money. Now, he's now written a book called A Gift to My Children, a book dedicated to his two daughters, and he's with us now from his hometown, his transplanted hometown in Singapore. And Jim, always good to see you. It has been quite a while.
I am delighted to be here, Betty. It's always good to be here with you.
Okay, Jim. Well, great to have you with us. And, I want to start off actually, Jim, though, with the news that we've been talking about the last 2 days, which is the swine flu outbreak. As you know, in Asia, very familiar with the bird flu, the pig flu, also SARS. What's your view on this outbreak? I mean, how much could this impact the global economy?
Well, Betty, if it hits the global economy like it did Asia 7 or 8 years, well, 5 or 6 years ago, it'll be a disaster. As you remember, I think you were here then, Asia closed down for about 6 months. People didn't go to school, they didn't go to work, they wouldn't ride the bus, they wouldn't get on airplanes. I mean, it could be a real disaster at a time when the world economy is already weakened anyway. Now, I have no idea what's going to happen. You ask how bad it could be. That's how bad it was in Asia.
Right, and when we've heard some people talk about the cost of containing this could run into the trillions of dollars. But let me ask you this, Jim, because you've been very bullish on emerging markets. You've called it right before. But when something like this happens, whether it's in China with SARS or Mexico here with the swine flu, I mean, should that make an investor pause about going into these emerging markets?
Well, Betty, I mean, it's happening in America, too. When you say emerging markets, they're finding this all over the world. I hardly consider this an emerging markets problem. As you remember, back in the early 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, Singapore and Hong Kong, which are hardly emerging markets, were devastated by what happened. You know, in the U.S., it's so far, apparently, it's hitting the U.S., too. It's not hitting other markets. It's hitting the big countries so far.
All right, but I mean, the epicenter is Mexico, and so that's why, that's why that question is relevant in the sense that it's started in emerging markets, and it's a factor perhaps that some investors should think about.
Well, yes, I guess you could put it that way. One has to think about everything, though. But if you look at some place like the United States has a central bank which is forcing us into bankruptcy. So, I mean, you go to developed countries and you see how bad they can be affected, too. Problems happen all over the world. Look at some of the European banks. Some of the European banks have gigantic commitments to Central Europe. I mean, that's maybe going to be worse than this bird flu outbreak that's taking place.
Okay. Jim, let me turn back here to the U.S. because I'm going to be talking about some of the topics that I know are your favorites to talk about, including the banks and the automakers. I want to take the automakers first. There's a lot of reports out today that perhaps we may see the government own half of GM, the UAW talking about owning also a big stake in Chrysler. What is your view, though? Do you think that the car makers here in the U.S. are finally doing the serious restructuring that they need to do?
Of course they're not, Betty. I mean, they're all keeping their jobs. They're doing their best to hold on to their positions. Betty, can you imagine what Karl Marx must be thinking right now? That poor guy somewhere is saying, America is finally succumbing. The automobile industry is owned by the government and by the labor unions. The banks, the financial institutions are owned by the government. I mean, what more could he want? When you look at America in 10 years, what are we going to look back on? We're going to say our automobile industry has continued to be run into the ground because it's owned by the government, just as happened in the UK or Russia or some of the other places where they took over the automobile industry or essentially took it over. Okay. I mean, what are we going to have in 10 years with a country that's run this way?
Jim, I wanted to get your sense. We've got swine flu. We've got some people talking about perhaps the start of recovery here in the United States, maybe other parts of the world. What are you doing with your money right now in this environment?
Well, Peter, I'm not sure we're going to have recovery in the United States. I don't think we are. But having said that, for one of the few times in my life, I don't have many shorts at all. I have essentially no shorts, as a matter of fact. I don't even feel comfortable having no shorts. But I don't find many things that are compelling to sell short. So I'm sitting here with some money looking for things to invest in. The only things I can find where the fundamentals continue to improve are commodities, which we've discussed before on this show. The commodity fundamentals are getting better. better, no matter what happens to the rest of the world. The fundamentals for General Motors are not getting better. The fundamentals at Citibank are not getting better. So the places that I am putting money, new money, is into the commodities markets, and I'm looking for things to sell short, but I think it's too soon to sell short. This rally, I thought this rally had further to go, and I was waiting.
Well, you say it's too soon to sell short, but Jim, you were short the banks, you covered them. Are you considering, or what would trigger you to go short back on that sector?
Well, no, I'm not going to short Citibank at $3. I mean, maybe it's going to go bankrupt. It also could rally to $6 just as easily. Likewise, Bank of America. No, Betty, these things are down dramatically, huge amounts. You can make money kicking a dead horse, but I think whatever the new shorts I find, I don't think it's going to be in the financial industry, unless, of course, this rally, which has been taking place, turns out to be much, much, much stronger than even I expect. And as I say, I've covered nearly all my shorts, and I haven't put any out for a while.
Right, and I presume, as you were saying, you were buying commodities through your indexes. Jim, we don't have a whole lot of time, so I need to get to your book. Interesting book. I read it last night, A Gift to My Children for Your Two Daughters. Tell me, if you wanted to leave our viewers with one parcel of wisdom from that book, what would it be?
Well, the lessons of life and the lessons of the market are what I'm trying to teach these little girls. Think for yourself. Think independently. Be skeptical of everything you hear. Be careful of the boys. The boys need you more than you need them.
Right. That was something that I wasn't taught when I was a little girl. So you should have given that advice to me, Jim. All right. Thanks so much. Always great to see you. We'll love to have you back on. Jim Rogers, Rogers Holdings.
Hear more Bloomberg News reports on the Bloomberg Terminal at AV Go, on Bloomberg Television, and on Bloomberg Radio. Copyright Bloomberg LP 2000.